The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm golden glow over the bustling streets of downtown. People were rushing to work, sipping coffee from paper cups, and chatting on their phones as they navigated the sidewalks. Amidst all this activity stood Lux & Legacy, an elegant jewelry store that sparkled like a jewel itself under the early morning light. Its glass windows were polished to perfection, reflecting the world outside while inviting passers-by to step inside and explore its treasures. Victoria Hayes pulled up in her sleek black car, parking it neatly beside the curb. She stepped out, wearing a simple yet stylish outfit: dark jeans, a fitted blazer, and comfortable flats. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, giving her an approachable, no-frills look. To anyone passing by, she might have looked like just another customer, stopping by for a quick browse. But Victoria wasn't just any customer. She was the heart and soul behind Lux & Legacy. She had built this business from scratch, pouring years of hard work, creativity, and determination into every detail. From designing unique pieces to overseeing marketing campaigns, Victoria had done it all herself at first. Over time, her efforts paid off, and Lux & Legacy grew into a chain with multiple locations across the city. Yet despite her success, Victoria always made it a point to visit her stores unannounced now and then. She believed there was value in seeing how things ran when people weren't expecting the boss to show up. Today, however, felt different. As she pushed open the heavy glass door of her flagship store, a soft bell chimed overhead, signaling her arrival. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polish and fresh flowers, a signature touch Victoria insisted on for all her stores. Employees were already busy preparing for the day ahead. Some were arranging displays, carefully positioning rings and necklaces so they caught the light perfectly. Others were dusting shelves or organizing paperwork behind the counter. The atmosphere was calm but focused, humming with quiet energy. As Victoria wandered through the store, taking everything in, she noticed something new: a man standing near the main counter. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored suit, and carried himself with an air of authority. His name tag read, Gregory Miller, Manager. Victoria didn't recognize him immediately, which wasn't unusual given how many employees worked across the chain. Still, something about his demeanor caught her attention. Maybe it was the way he scanned the room with a critical eye, or perhaps it was the slightly stiff way he greeted one of the sales associates. Whatever it was, it made her pause. Deciding to introduce herself casually, Victoria approached the counter where Gregory was standing. Up close, she could see that he had sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess everyone around him. When he noticed her approaching, his expression shifted ever so slightly, from neutral to vaguely suspicious. "Good morning," Victoria said warmly, offering a small smile. "How's everything going today?" Gregory tilted his head slightly, studying her as if trying to place her face. After a moment, he replied, "Can I help you with something?" His tone was polite but distant, lacking the warmth she usually received from her staff. "I'm actually here to check on how things are running," Victoria explained, keeping her voice light. "I haven't been in for a while, so I thought I'd stop by." Her words didn't seem to reassure him. Instead, his gaze flickered over her casual attire, the jeans, the lack of flashy accessories, and lingered just long enough to make her feel scrutinized. For a split second, Victoria wondered if she should have dressed more formally. Then again, why should she? This was her store, after all. "Well," Gregory said slowly, crossing his arms over his chest, "if you're not planning to buy anything, I'll need to ask you to leave. We're preparing for our customers right now." Victoria blinked, momentarily taken aback. Had he really just said that? She glanced around, half expecting someone else to step in and clarify who she was. Surely, the other employees would recognize her, or at least realize that dismissing her so rudely wasn't appropriate. But instead, the room remained eerily silent. Everyone seemed frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. For a brief moment, Victoria considered letting it slide. Maybe Gregory was new and simply hadn't been briefed on the company hierarchy yet. Or maybe he was having a bad day and didn't mean to come across as dismissive, but deep down she knew better. There was something more insidious at play here, something rooted in assumptions based on appearance rather than fact. And whether Gregory realized it or not, he was about to learn exactly who he was dealing with. Instead of reacting immediately, Victoria took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had faced prejudice before, both personally and professionally, but experiencing it within the walls of her own creation hit differently. It stung. It burned. But most of all, it fueled her resolve. If Gregory thought she was just another random person wandering into the store, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. Victoria stood there for a moment, her mind racing as she processed what had just happened. The manager's words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. "If you're not planning to buy anything, I'll need to ask you to leave." Leave? From her own store? It was almost surreal, like something out of a movie where the plot twists just a little too far to be believable. But this wasn't fiction. This was real life, and the sting of the situation was sharp and undeniable. She glanced around again, hoping someone would step in. Surely, one of the employees who had worked with her for years would recognize her. They'd rush over, explain who she was, and diffuse the awkwardness before it escalated further. But no one moved. Instead, the room remained eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the overhead lights and the distant clink of jewelry being rearranged on display trays. The staff seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let the scene play out. Gregory, meanwhile, didn't appear to notice the tension he'd created. His arms were still crossed tightly over his chest, his expression firm and unyielding. He looked at Victoria with a mixture of impatience and disdain, as though she were wasting his time by standing there. "Ma'am," he said finally, his voice firmer now, "I'm going to have to insist. If you don't intend to make a purchase, I'll need you to step aside so we can focus on serving our actual customers." The word "actual" hit Victoria like a punch to the gut. She knew exactly what he meant by it, the implication that she didn't belong here, that her presence somehow disrupted the polished image of the store. It wasn't just about her casual attire or lack of visible wealth. It was deeper than that. It was about assumptions rooted in bias, assumptions that had nothing to do with reality and everything to do with how people looked on the surface. For a split second, Victoria considered walking away. She could turn around, leave the store, and deal with this later when emotions weren't running high. After all, she was the CEO. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone, especially not someone like Gregory. But then she thought about the bigger picture. What kind of message would that send? Would it encourage behavior like this to continue unchecked? More importantly, what kind of example would she be setting for her employees if she simply walked away without addressing the issue? Taking a deep breath, Victoria squared her shoulders and met Gregory's gaze directly. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of authority when she spoke. "Let me clarify something," she said, her tone steady and measured. "I am a customer here. In fact, I'm more than that. I'm the owner of this store. So, unless you want to explain why you're denying service to your boss, I suggest you reconsider your approach." The words landed like a bombshell. For a moment, Gregory's confident demeanor faltered. His eyes widened slightly and his posture shifted as though he'd been caught off guard. But instead of apologizing or backtracking, he doubled down, his skepticism hardening into outright defiance. "Owner," he repeated, his tone dripping with disbelief. "Right, and I suppose you expect me to believe that?" Victoria felt her jaw tighten, but she refused to let him see her frustration. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, quickly dialing her assistant. Within seconds, the call connected, and her assistant's cheerful voice came through the speaker. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes. How can I assist you today?" Gregory's face paled as he realized what was happening. One of the nearby sales associates, sensing the gravity of the situation, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir," the associate said quietly, glancing between Gregory and Victoria, "this really is Ms. Hayes. She owns the company." Despite the mounting evidence against him, Gregory didn't back down. Instead, he scoffed dismissively, his voice rising slightly. "Look, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not falling for some trick. If you're truly the owner, prove it. Show me something, anything that proves you're telling the truth. At this point, the tension in the room was palpable. Employees exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves as they watched the confrontation unfold. Some looked embarrassed, while others appeared angry on Victoria's behalf. A few even shook their heads in disbelief, clearly shocked by Gregory's refusal to acknowledge the obvious. Victoria, however, remained composed. She opened a folder on her phone containing photos of recent company events. Photos where she was front and center, leading meetings, shaking hands with clients, and posing with her team. She held up the screen for Gregory to see. "Does this look like proof to you?" she asked coolly, her patience wearing thin. Gregory stared at the images, his face growing redder by the second. Still, he couldn't or wouldn't admit he was wrong. Instead, he muttered under his breath, insisting there must be some misunderstanding. But his protests fell flat, drowned out by the weight of the evidence staring him in the face. Now the entire store had stopped what they were doing to watch the exchange. Customers lingered near the entrance, curious about the commotion. Even passers-by outside slowed their pace, peering through the glass windows to catch a glimpse of what was happening. The once quiet morning had turned into a spectacle, and Gregory was at the center of it all. Finally, unable to deny the truth any longer, he stammered an apology, though it lacked sincerity. I didn't realize," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "It won't happen again." But Victoria wasn't satisfied with a half-hearted apology. She knew that actions spoke louder than words, and Gregory's behavior had already spoken volumes. With a calmness that masked the storm brewing inside her, she replied, "No, it won't happen again, because you're fired." The words hung in the air like thunder, reverberating through the store. Gasps rippled through the crowd of employees and customers alike. Gregory's mouth dropped open in shock, his face turning pale. "Wait, what?" he sputtered, taking a step back as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "You can't fire me, you don't even know me." "Oh, I know enough," Victoria shot back, her voice cutting through his protests like a knife. "You judged me based on how I look instead of treating me with basic respect. That's not just unprofessional, it's unacceptable, and it has no place in my company." With that, she signaled for security, who arrived within minutes to escort Gregory out of the store. As he left, muttering under his breath and casting furtive glances over his shoulder, the room erupted into quiet murmurs. Employees whispered to each other, sharing their relief that the situation had been resolved, but also their discomfort at having witnessed such blatant discrimination firsthand. Once Gregory was gone, Victoria turned to address her team. Her expression softened, and she offered them a small, reassuring smile. "I know that was difficult to watch," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But I want you all to remember something. We're better than this. This store and this company is built on values of inclusivity, respect, and integrity. We don't tolerate behavior that undermines those principles, no matter who it comes from." Her words resonated deeply with the staff, many of whom nodded, in agreement. One young sales associate approached her afterward, thanking her for standing up not only for herself, but also for others who might face similar treatment. It was a sobering reminder that incidents like this weren't isolated. They were part of a larger pattern that needed to be addressed. As Victoria stood there, surrounded by her team, she knew this moment would stay with her forever. It wasn't just about firing a bad manager. It was about sending a clear message that prejudice and bias had no place in her business, or in society as a whole. And while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she was ready to face it head-on. After the initial shock of the confrontation, Victoria took a moment to collect her thoughts. The store was still buzzing with quiet murmurs as employees tried to process what had just happened. Some looked relieved, others stunned, and a few were visibly angry, not at Victoria but at Gregory for his behavior. Despite the tension in the air, there was also a sense of catharsis, as though a weight had been lifted. Still, Victoria knew that firing Gregory wasn't enough. This incident wasn't an isolated problem. It was a symptom of something much bigger. She walked over to the main counter, her steps deliberate and calm. Her presence commanded attention without her needing to say a word. When she reached the counter, she turned to face her team. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken questions and emotions. Finally, one of the senior sales associates cleared their throat nervously. "Ms. Hayes," he began hesitantly, "are you okay?" Victoria offered him a small, reassuring smile. "I'm fine," she replied softly, though everyone could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. "But I need all of you to understand something important. What happened here today isn't just about me or Gregory. It's about how we treat people, every single person who walks through those doors. Whether they're dressed casually or formally, whether they look like they can afford our most expensive piece or not, every customer deserves respect. And so does every member of this team." Her words resonated deeply with the staff. Heads nodded slowly, and some even exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the truth in what she was saying. But Victoria wasn't done yet. She leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the edge of the counter. Her voice grew firmer, more authoritative, as she continued. "Gregory's actions today were unacceptable. But let's be honest, he didn't get here by accident. People don't develop attitudes like that overnight. It's learned behavior, and sometimes it slips into places where it shouldn't. That's why we have to do better, not just for ourselves, but for each other and for the customers who trust us." The room fell silent again, but this time, it was a thoughtful silence. Employees seemed to be reflecting on her words, perhaps thinking about times when they'd witnessed similar biases, or even contributed to them unintentionally. Victoria could see it in their expressions: guilt, regret, determination. Whatever they were feeling, she hoped it would push them toward change. Deciding to act quickly, Victoria pulled out her phone and dialed her executive assistant. Within seconds, her assistant answered, cheerful and professional as always. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes," she chirped. "How can I assist you?" "I need you to set up an emergency meeting with the executive team," Victoria said, her tone brisk, but controlled. "We're going to discuss next steps for addressing what happened today, and making sure it never happens again." Her assistant paused, sensing the urgency in her voice. "Of course, Ms. Hayes. Shall I schedule it for later this afternoon?" "Yes, please," Victoria replied. "And make sure everyone knows this is non-negotiable. We're doing this today." As she ended the call, she glanced around the room. Her employees were watching her intently, waiting for her next move. She decided to address them directly, knowing transparency was key. "Listen, I know today has been difficult for all of us, but I want you to know that I'm not just going to sweep this under the rug. What happened here is a wake-up call, for me, for this store, and for the entire company. We're going to take action, starting right now." With that, she outlined her immediate plans. First, she instructed the team to document everything that had transpired, the timeline, Gregory's comments, and how the situation had escalated. She wanted a clear record of events, not only for accountability but also to ensure lessons could be learned. Next, she announced that security cameras would be installed throughout the store, not to spy on employees, but to provide transparency and protect both staff and customers from future incidents. Lastly, she promised to implement training programs focused on diversity, inclusion, and unconscious bias, ensuring that everyone understood the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. By the time she finished speaking, the mood in the room had shifted. While the earlier tension remained, it was now mixed with a sense of hope and purpose. Employees began discussing ideas among themselves, suggesting ways to improve communication and foster a more inclusive environment. One young associate even approached Victoria afterward, thanking her for standing up not only for herself but for others who might face similar treatment. "It means a lot," the associate said earnestly. "Not just to me, but to everyone who's ever felt overlooked because of how they look." Victoria smiled warmly, touched by the sincerity in the young woman's voice. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "But remember, this isn't just about me. It's about all of us working together to create a better workplace and a better world." Later that afternoon, Victoria joined the emergency meeting with her executive team via video conference. The discussion was intense but productive. Together, they drafted a comprehensive plan to address systemic issues within the company. They agreed to revise hiring practices, ensuring candidates were evaluated based on skills and values rather than superficial traits. They also committed to launching a mentorship program aimed at supporting minority employees and helping them advance within the organization. Additionally, they decided to partner with local organizations focused on racial equity and social justice, using Lux and Legacy's platform to amplify marginalized voices. As the meeting drew to a close, Victoria felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew these changes wouldn't happen overnight, but she was determined to see them through. Before signing off, she addressed her team one last time. "This isn't just about damage control," she said firmly. "It's about building something meaningful, something that reflects the values we claim to stand for. Let's get to work." That evening, after returning home, Victoria sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. She stared at the blank screen for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then, with a deep breath, she began typing. By the time she finished, she had written a heartfelt post detailing everything that had happened, from Gregory's dismissive attitude to her decision to fire him and the steps she planned to take moving forward. She included photos of the store and screenshots of the initiatives her team was working on, emphasizing her commitment to creating lasting change. Before hitting post, she hesitated. Sharing such a personal story online meant opening herself up to criticism and scrutiny. But then she thought about the countless people who faced discrimination every day, people whose voices often went unheard. If sharing her experience could spark conversations, inspire action, or simply remind someone that they weren't alone, then it would be worth it. With that in mind, Victoria pressed publish and watched as her post went live. Almost instantly, comments began pouring in. Supporters praised her courage and leadership, while others shared their own stories of facing prejudice in retail spaces. Industry leaders chimed in, calling her response a model for how companies should handle bias and discrimination. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into a national conversation about racism and inequality. As Victoria scrolled through the responses, she felt a mix of emotions: pride, sadness, anger, and hope. But above all, she felt motivated to keep fighting, to keep pushing for change, and to use her platform to make a difference. Because in the end, it wasn't just about her. It was about creating a legacy, one that extended far beyond jewelry and luxury. The days following Victoria's viral post were a whirlwind of activity. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, messages from friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had been moved by her story. Social media was ablaze with discussions about bias in retail spaces, and news outlets couldn't stop talking about the Black CEO who stood up to discrimination within her own business. For Victoria, it was both exhilarating and exhausting. On one hand, she was grateful for the outpouring of support and solidarity. On the other hand, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about using this moment to drive meaningful change. Victoria spent hours poring over comments and feedback, absorbing the stories people shared. There were countless accounts from individuals who had experienced similar treatment, being ignored, dismissed, or outright mistreated because of their race, clothing, or perceived socioeconomic status. One woman recounted how she'd been followed around a high-end boutique as if she were a thief, despite being a regular customer. Another man described how he'd been denied service at a restaurant simply because he wore sneakers instead of dress shoes. These stories resonated deeply with Victoria, reinforcing her belief that what happened in her store was part of a much larger issue. Determined to turn this moment into action, Victoria called another meeting with her executive team. This time, they gathered in person at the company's headquarters, a sleek, modern office space filled with natural light and collaborative workstations. As the team settled into their seats, Victoria stood at the front of the room, her expression serious but hopeful. "We've talked about accountability," she began, her voice steady and clear. "But now we need to focus on solutions. What can we do, not just for our employees but for the broader community, to ensure that no one feels excluded or disrespected?" Her question sparked a lively discussion. Ideas flowed freely as the team brainstormed ways to address systemic biases and promote inclusivity. They agreed that education was key, so they decided to partner with experts in diversity training to create workshops tailored specifically for Lux and Legacy. These sessions would cover topics like unconscious bias, microaggressions, and cultural competency, equipping employees with the tools they needed to foster a welcoming environment for everyone. But Victoria didn't want to stop there. She envisioned something bigger, a way to use her platform to uplift others and create opportunities for marginalized communities. That's when inspiration struck. "What if we launched a nonprofit?" she suggested, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Something that focuses on mentoring minority entrepreneurs and providing resources to help them succeed." The idea was met with enthusiastic nods and murmurs of approval. Together, they sketched out the framework for what would become Legacy Beyond Luxury, an organization dedicated to empowering underrepresented voices in the business world. The nonprofit would offer scholarships, host networking events, and provide mentorship programs connecting aspiring entrepreneurs with industry leaders. It would also collaborate with schools and community centers to teach financial literacy and entrepreneurship skills to young people from diverse backgrounds. As plans for the nonprofit took shape, Victoria turned her attention back to her stores. She wanted to make sure every location reflected the values she was fighting to uphold. To that end, she announced a series of changes aimed at improving transparency and accountability. First, she implemented a policy requiring all managers to undergo leadership training focused on empathy, communication, and conflict resolution. Second, she introduced anonymous feedback systems, allowing employees and customers to report concerns without fear of retaliation. And third, she committed to diversifying her hiring practices, ensuring that candidates from all walks of life had equal opportunities to join the Lux and Legacy team. These initiatives weren't just about damage control. They were about setting a new standard for excellence. Victoria believed that businesses had a responsibility to lead by example, and she was determined to prove that profitability and inclusivity could go hand in hand. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Changing ingrained attitudes and behaviors takes time, patience, and persistence. But she was ready for the challenge. In the weeks that followed, Victoria threw herself into the work of building Legacy Beyond Luxury. She reached out to mentors, advisors, and potential partners, sharing her vision and inviting them to join her mission. Many were eager to lend their support, recognizing the importance of addressing inequality in tangible, actionable ways. Slowly, but surely the pieces began to fall into place. One evening, as Victoria sat at her desk reviewing proposals for the nonprofit, she received a call from a journalist. The reporter had seen her social media post and wanted to interview her for a feature article. At first, Victoria hesitated. She wasn't seeking fame or recognition. She simply wanted to make a difference. But then she realized that telling her story could amplify the message she was trying to send. If sharing her experience inspired others to take action, or gave someone the courage to speak up against injustice, it would be worth it. During the interview, Victoria spoke candidly about the incident in her store and the emotions it stirred within her. She talked about the pain of being judged based on appearance, the frustration of knowing such biases still existed, and the hope she felt when seeing how many people rallied behind her cause. She also emphasized the importance of turning personal challenges into opportunities for growth. "This isn't just about me," she told the reporter. "It's about creating a ripple effect, a movement that encourages people to reflect on their own actions and strive for a better future." The article was published a few days later, and the response was overwhelming. Readers praised Victoria for her vulnerability and determination, while organizations across the country reached out to collaborate with Legacy Beyond Luxury. Some offered funding, while others volunteered their expertise or pledged to spread awareness about the nonprofit's mission. It was a testament to the power of storytelling and the impact one person could have when they chose to stand up for what was right. Despite the progress, Victoria remained grounded. She knew that true change required more than words or good intentions. It demanded consistent effort and accountability. Every morning she reminded herself why she started this journey, not for accolades or applause, but to build a legacy that transcended jewelry and luxury. A legacy rooted in equality, compassion, and opportunity for all. As she prepared for the grand reopening of the flagship store, the same location where Gregory's discriminatory behavior had unfolded, Victoria felt a renewed sense of purpose. The past few months had been challenging, but they had also been transformative. She had faced adversity head-on, refused to let hatred define her, and channeled her pain into something positive. Now, as she stood on the cusp of a new chapter, she knew the best was yet to come. The day of the grand reopening arrived, and the flagship store of Luxe and Legacy was transformed into a celebration of resilience, hope, and renewal. The glass windows sparkled under the morning sun, adorned with tasteful banners that read, "A. New chapter begins," in elegant gold lettering. Inside, the space buzzed with energy as employees bustled around, putting the final touches on displays and arranging refreshments for guests. Every detail had been carefully curated to reflect not just the beauty of the jewelry, but also the deeper values Victoria wanted her company to embody: inclusivity, respect, and empowerment. Victoria stood at the entrance, dressed in a tailored, navy blue suit that exuded confidence without overshadowing her warmth. Her hair was styled in soft waves framing her face, and she wore a delicate necklace from one of her latest collections, a subtle nod to the artistry that defined her brand. As she greeted early arrivals, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride mixed with gratitude. This wasn't just another event. It was a milestone, a testament to how far they'd come since that fateful morning weeks ago. Guests began streaming in shortly after 10 o'clock. Among them were loyal customers, industry leaders, local activists, and members of the media. But what truly warmed Victoria's heart was seeing so many unfamiliar faces: young entrepreneurs, students, and community advocates who had heard about Legacy Beyond Legacy and wanted to learn more. They filed into the store, their eyes wide with curiosity as they took in the dazzling displays and vibrant atmosphere. At exactly 11 o'clock, Victoria stepped onto a small stage set up near the center of the store. A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned to her. She smiled warmly, taking a moment to scan the room before beginning her speech. "Thank you all for being here today," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "This is more than just a reopening. It's a declaration, a promise to ourselves and to our community that we will always strive to be better." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then, with a deep breath, she continued. "Not long ago, this store became the setting for an experience I never expected to have. I walked through those doors as the owner of this business, yet I was treated as though I didn't belong. For a moment, I questioned whether I should stay silent or confront what happened. But then I realized something important. Staying silent wouldn't change anything. Speaking up might." Her voice grew stronger as she recounted the events of that day, the dismissive attitude of the former manager, the shock of her staff, and her decision to fire him on the spot. It wasn't an easy choice, she admitted. But it was necessary, because when someone chooses to judge others based on appearances instead of treating them with dignity, it creates a culture of exclusion. And that has no place in my company, or in any workplace. The audience listened intently, some nodding in agreement while others exchanged knowing glances. Victoria could see the impact her words were having, and it gave her the courage to push forward. "What happened here wasn't unique," she continued. "Every day, people face discrimination in ways big and small. Some are denied service because of how they look. Others are overlooked for opportunities because of where they come from. These moments may seem insignificant to some, but they leave lasting scars." She paused again, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "That's why we're doing things differently now. We've implemented new policies to ensure transparency and accountability. We've partnered with experts to provide diversity training for our staff, and most importantly, we've launched Legacy Beyond Luxury, a nonprofit dedicated to mentoring minority entrepreneurs and creating pathways for success. As she spoke about the nonprofit, her tone softened, filled with hope and determination. This isn't just about giving back, it's about leveling the playing field. It's about saying to young dreamers, your voice matters, your ideas matter, you matter. Because everyone deserves a chance to shine, regardless of their background. When she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. People cheered, whistled, and clapped, their enthusiasm echoing off the walls. Several attendees approached her afterward to express their admiration and share their own stories of overcoming adversity. One young woman, a college student studying fashion design, tearfully thanked Victoria for inspiring her to pursue her dreams despite facing skepticism from peers and professors. Another man, a small business owner, praised her for using her platform to advocate for marginalized voices. Later that afternoon, Victoria took a quiet moment to herself, stepping outside to breathe in the crisp autumn air. Standing on the sidewalk, she watched as groups of people milled about, chatting animatedly and admiring the store's displays. Children giggled as they pressed their noses against the glass, marveling at the glittering jewels inside. Families posed for photos beside the banners, capturing memories of a day that felt like a turning point. For Victoria, this scene was everything she had hoped for, and more. It wasn't just about selling jewelry anymore. It was about building connections, fostering understanding, and creating a space where everyone felt welcome. She thought back to the challenges she'd faced along the way, the sleepless nights, the tough decisions, the moments of doubt, and realized they had all led her to this moment. This was her legacy, not just in name, but in action. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the city, Victoria returned to the store to join her team. Together, they celebrated the success of the day, sharing laughter and stories over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Employees hugged each other tightly, their bond stronger than ever. Customers lingered long after closing time, reluctant to leave, the warm, inviting atmosphere. Before heading home, Victoria made one last announcement. Today marks the beginning of something special, she told her team. We've shown the world that we can turn pain into purpose, adversity into opportunity. But let's not forget, this is just the start. There's still so much work to do. Let's keep pushing forward, together. Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply with everyone present. As the evening drew to a close, Victoria locked up the store and stood outside for a few moments longer, gazing at the glowing windows. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had turned a difficult chapter into a catalyst for change. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to make a difference. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the victory, one that belonged not just to her but to everyone who believed in the power of resilience, compassion, and unity.